good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our World Council webinar, How to Globally Engage and Transform Your Credit Union through a Global Journey. My name is Mike Reiter, Executive Director of the Worldwide Foundation. We have a really great webinar for you, hosted by Dwayne Naylor, President of Civic Federal Credit Union, headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. For the next 40 minutes, Dwayne will take us on a global journey, starting with the World Council field assignment he went on in China in 2007, and ending with the creation of Civic Federal Credit Union, and how his global experiences has influenced his leading Civic, and how a similar global journey can aid each of you as well. Beyond his extensive global travels, Dwayne is a passionate credit union advocate and has worked in the credit union industry for more than 25 years. His focus on the triple bottom line, a sustainable enterprise that delivers economic, social, and environmental benefits, is what drives the Civic commitment to people, planet, and prosperity. Dwayne earned a global MBA from the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University and a Bachelor of Science from East Carolina University. He is a 2015 graduate of ABA Stonier Graduate School of Banking at the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton. He is a credit union development educator and is a certified chief executive. And most recently, he became a trustee of the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions, the charitable and engagement arm of the World Council. If you have any questions for Dwayne or myself, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type them in there. I'll be moderating the Q&A for Dwayne at the end of today's program. And today's webinar is being recorded and will be available later today on the World Council YouTube channel at youtube.com/Woku. So now I'd like to turn over to my friend and colleague, Dwayne Naylor, President of Civic Federal Credit Union. Dwayne?
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for taking time today to be a part of this. And so when I was looking through different things that we can present to you, I think you can go to the My Global Journey slide if you like. There's three things that I would like to leave everyone with today, and that is, one is the challenge. As you're presented these ideas, I am nowhere near an expert. I have some experience, but I'm just beginning on my learning journey. So the three things are to challenge your own personal learning journey and how you align with your ideal self. So when I'm sharing my story, it's not really about me. It's just really about how you see yourself and your impact on the world. The other is that cooperative finance, and I know for this audience that everyone believes deeply in their heart and what we're doing, but cooperative finance is a tool for good. And there's a paradigm shift taking place, I believe, in society and management, that people want to be more purpose-driven. They want to really have an impact. And at no other time has this evolution in terms of cooperative finance being able to be a tool for good than right now what we're experiencing. So I think that what we do is a solution for the world and can serve people in a way that has not happened since probably the 1930s, at least in the US. And there's a lot of activity taking place, and the World Council of Credit Unions is in the middle of all these. So these engagements are to spread cooperative finance. So that's cooperative finance as a tool for good being number two. Number three is engagement. I'm going to challenge you on what engagement means. And by engaging in global activities, what that means to you. There's different viewpoints of responsibility of spreading cooperative finance around the world, and I'm going to challenge any of the viewpoints that does not support that is a primary responsibility of us as leaders in this movement. So challenging your own personal learning journey, what this information could mean and what your story would look like. Cooperative finance is a tool for good and our responsibility of spreading it around the world. And engagement. You will take away more than you will give in any of these engagements, as I did in many of these trips. So with those three items, I'll start a little bit about my personal journey. You heard the bio, but when I was at State Employees Credit Union, and I left there around 2000, loved the organization more than anything, but I had a sense in my heart that I wanted to learn more and see more. And I came to a local government federal credit union, and Marie Smith has been, my CEO, has been very instrumental in my learning journey. And it began with reading The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, and saying that the world had changed. And then that led me to the World Council, which led me to my first trip in China that I'll speak about in a moment. And that trip, one of the reflections that I'll get to in a moment was, I don't know enough. I ended up getting a global MBA. And then now I'm on a doctoral journey of also studying values-based banking and cooperative finance around the world. So this journey continues today, and I look for ways that I can have impact. But I can tell you that my involvement with the World Council has changed everything in my life, and everything how I view, not only how I view the world, but how we manage our credit unions here in North Carolina. So it started in 2007. I landed on the plane. I didn't know what time it was because it's 24 hours different. And Brian Branch picked me up, and literally within 45 minutes of landing, I'm at a round table with all the CEOs on the trip, and I'm eating an octopus, small octopus for the first time, trying to make sure that the octopus stayed down, and because I had no idea what was going on. So the culture shock was vivid. We stayed there over 2 weeks, I believe. And what I learned on that journey, the challenge was, or one of the biggest challenges was the ability to help migrant workers in the western part of the country that went to the eastern part of the country to send money back to their home communities. And China has a huge migration of people coming from the rural areas to work in urban areas to send money back, and the money could not be sent easily. So that was one of the main issues. The other is the Bank of China had a project of working for the reform of the rural cooperatives in China. And so this being my first trip, it's like, oh, I'm here to help. I know what's going on. And it did not take long at all to understand that everything was larger than I thought. Everything in China is huge. A rural credit cooperative could be 20 times bigger than my credit union. And so all the numbers were big. But one thing I want to draw attention to, and this reason we put challenge and opportunity in terms of China, that symbol, that character is in Chinese represents a challenge is an opportunity. It's the same thing. So every time I'm looking at a challenge, I'm always saying there is an opportunity in this. So our work was very important there. So we were bringing in best practices and the systems and shared branching, the shared branching network that was so effective here in the United States. And with that, the overall project of full implementation and possible consideration of transforming to a credit union system besides the cooperative ended up being kind of stalled by the Communist Party. And when we went to all the areas in some of the poorest parts of China where there were very few tourists that come, there was a completely democratic board that was elected. But there was always one person that was speaking the entire meeting, and that was a representative of the Labor Party. So it is kind of a different world, but we did meet with the Communist Party, and we talked through some initiatives, and it was stalled. The overall project was stalled, but it was a huge success. When we came back, we raised money for the studies and the implementation of some things. And so they embraced shared branching, and it did impact greatly that the rural credit cooperatives were allowed to, were positioned where they could transfer that money back. So this really changed the communities and the lives and made it much easier for that money to transfer. So if you can imagine the amount of the need for the money in those communities, and in our case, if a family member was leaving, but they could not get the money back to you, and you're not really allowed to travel the country freely, this was a huge success on this project. And the lessons learned, what we had was that I was asked, and I really didn't know enough. The staff of World Council was very good about providing books and things to read, but you really couldn't get your mind around it. One thing that I loved was the love of the people and understanding that there are good people everywhere and they all want the same things, which is safety with their family. So some reflections on this was it honestly, on my personal learning journey, and I think it's important I share that today, on my personal learning journey, it changed how I viewed everything. And when I got back, somebody's going, I bet you had culture shock when you're there. And I said, well, I actually have culture shock here when I got back, because how the people treated us and all that other stuff was remarkable. So I really understood that finance and access to capital could change the world. And we believe that in what we do in our day-to-day lives here, but it was much deeper understanding of seeing some very poor areas that people just needed someone to treat them with respect and dignity. And so the people are the same, they're wonderful. I've got all kinds of memories and stories and pictures of people really coming to me and making a difference, and very smart people. So that was life-changing for me. And I was at a credit union in Virginia, then I came back to North Carolina, and in 2013, the Falkland Islands, a little history is there was a war essentially with the UK and Argentina in the Falkland Islands about 30 years ago, and the Queen placed Standard Chartered Bank on the island right after that, and it had been about, at this point, it had been about 30 years, and that was the only bank on the island. Fishing rights brings in about 60 million US annually, and they recently had oil rights that was going to bring another 90 to 100 million dollars into the economy. The bank had not changed its rates for almost 30 years, and the fees were very high and the rates were very, very low. Even in 2013, it was very nominal of the amount of interest that they were paying. So we wanted to bring the credit union into that system, bring technology, ATMs and other access, but primarily there was no lending to the rural farmers. And so they could not get together and really have loans. And there was a government agency that was doing some loans, but we wanted to move that into a credit union. And so we met with everyone on that island, government. We investigated, I met with the bank, met with a bunch of, I said competition would be good. And we had some existing barriers. Historically, there was a cooperative on the island that had fraud in the organization, and it failed, and many people on the island lost money. So when you said credit union is a cooperative, where in a lot of places that builds trust, it was the exact opposite here. They did not trust volunteers to be able to pull together. So we were working against that. The capital injection and capital requirements was needed. The government was not interested in sending that in. The deposit insurance, we spoke to many government officials, and honestly, England wanted to extract money from the resources of the island and not inject more investment. They had some investment, but there's no deposit insurance. So we talked to quite a few people trying to bring deposit insurance to build the trust, and those efforts failed. Telecommunications, connecting to an ATM system with a reliable internet and things, it was a challenge, but it could have been it could have been fixed with satellite and things like that. So this study, I believe, was very effective, but it was hard. We had a big team that had to pull together and do 5-year forecasts, and there were 3 different phases of the project. The strategic plan was scenario planning, and our team, very broad team, accounting, finance, operations, we were all pulling together with the international group, with WOCU, also with leaders in the Falkland Islands to build that study. And it was very intense, and we learned a great deal. And one thing, as terms of the outcome, the bank, who had never changed rates, the reason this project did not launch is because we did not have enough leadership volunteers to come in to commit their lives to growing this credit union. It was supported greatly by the farmers in the rural areas, but also we could not get regulation, share insurance, and things like that. So what we did was we still came in and met with all the government leaders. And what happened for the first time in 30 years is the bank increased their rates, and it brought it closer to market, and they lowered their fees. So the fact that we were even there with this study, and it could be looked at in one view that it was not successful, but we changed lives on that island by being there in this engagement. So reflections, again, access to cooperative finance. The farmers started getting some loans, but most likely they could not pull it together the way they wanted to, the way they could have with the credit union. And the learning lesson is we take our systems for granted. We take for granted that we have a regulator that has a system in place that can be trusted. We have insured deposits, and we have volunteers and volunteer boards that are running our organizations. And it really made me appreciate all the commitment we have. And we brought back that, hey, if we have all this in place, then why can't we have a bigger impact in our communities? So that was a very, very big learning lesson. That was a long project. It was a year or so long, and it took a great deal of work, but we learned a great deal. Another opportunity came up when I was talking to World Council, and we were talking about we need to address the fact that there's more refugees in the world right now than at any other time in the history of man. And these refugees, they had resources and assets, but they did not really have access to capital to run their businesses and things like that. So one way to improve lives is to try to establish a model that allows cooperative finance to improve the lives in those communities, which are very important. And if we could take that model to Somalia and other areas that have a high number of refugees, then we could make a huge impact globally. So the challenges, there was a lot of challenges, but the challenges are just the government support of refugee camps, finding the leaders that would step up and volunteer to run this. There's some cultural norms of women's place in society and things like that are also challenges. As you know, women created the credit union industry almost in every country. We had men leaders, but the hard work at the very beginning in the 30s and 40s was created by women. And so the existing barriers, again, with some negative views of cooperatives and all the other things, we did not want to go to Baghdad to talk to the government, but we did meet with the governor of Kurdistan, which was eloquent and very supportive of what we were doing. And we found the local leaders. We met with local leaders, had tea, discussed the possibility of that. And I was wanting to commit to building a branch there on a refugee camp. And then the politics kind of fell apart in terms of the world. I mean, the U.S. was pulling out of the area and we could not return. And that is a broken promise, and we do want to get back in that area and be able to hopefully establish a model in refugee camps that are very effective in changing those lives. So again, overcoming regulatory and governmental framework. The wonderful thing about World Council is that they have a standard best practices of how governance and policy should work. We could bring that in, but to start, we wanted to start with a financial cooperative and then work on the regulation later. And again, I take that as an open project that still was a huge success in learning, but we're not done. We're not done in that respect. So we can go to the pictures. Yes. So in Kurdistan, people are absolutely wonderful in terms of how they love their families and everything. But we met like in that tent. We could be in that tent for 5 or 6 hours discussing things. So my personal journey, I'd lost my father right before that trip, and I said, no, this trip's important. So I went, and so I'm sitting in a tent hearing a father talk about his daughter being captured by ISIS, and he was trying to get money to retrieve her, to bring her back home, as many people were. And so when you hear that, it really changes your view of the world that we live in, the issues that we have to draw on. And that community leader not only was dealing with that in terms of a tragedy, and after 4 or 5 years trying to bring her daughter home, there's great joy in those refugee camps. There's great understanding and respect for each other. And so you just don't, you have views in your mind of how things are, but once you're there on the ground and you're building these relationships and meeting these brilliant people that are trying to find a way and understanding how cooperative finance could really help them not only get through, but thrive in any environment. And in the refugee camp, we not only wanted to build the system for them, but if they left the refugee camp and went back to their area, that they could take the credit union with them, right, with the shared branching and all that other stuff. So this isn't something that would, if the refugee camp was no longer needed, that they wouldn't have a solution. They would own the solution and take them back with them. So we learned a great deal. Children are children. They love life wherever they are, and we had a great time with them. The double checking my time here. So the learning from that was very emotional for me, and our ability to go back is going to be important as well. And there's other trips that I took that were meaningful, like to the Ukraine, and that was where cooperative farmers by policy cannot get a large enough loan to get heavy equipment to be able to share that equipment. So the World Council has done tremendous work in that area in terms of policy and pulling together the trade organizations and all that other stuff. So one thing about this whole system is that the impact that the World Council has in some of these systems, like starting a credit union system in Afghanistan, which is thriving right now, the impact is so critically important that it is changing the world. Cooperative finance can change the world. So I'll move to today. So part of the story today is, okay, you're working in these other areas. So what are you bringing back home? I've talked about a few times about how important the governance lessons are and the system we have a mature system that no, there's no perfect system, but it gives us all the tools that we need to change the lives of the members that we serve. And not only the members, but the communities at large. And so with that, we had come back, and there's some events that were taking place in North Carolina. And we took all the work from the Falkland Islands and all the lessons on the forecast and all the lessons on the policies and procedures and everything else. And we said there was a need to be able to serve small businesses directly. And we said, we're going to start a credit union from scratch. So I was asked the question, hey, if you could start this thing from scratch with no legacy technology and data and things like that, well, I mean, what would it look like? Well, that's what we were creating. And the team, the core team that worked on the Falkland Islands project, I mean, literally our first strategic plan was built off of the template that we built for the Falkland Islands. I'm not saying that that's going to take place on every time, but there'll be times that you can take what you learn. And again, one of the 3 points was you will take away more than you give. We go there thinking we're experts, and we come back being humbled by the possibilities that we have. So we started Civic Federal Credit Union to serve. It was chartered for the purposes of business services, but we also have consumer. And that core community knew the questions to ask and what we needed to do. And we took the initial investigation in technology and how we could build an infrastructure done in Falkland Islands. And we built the credit union from scratch. We did not know it was going to take over 2 years to get the charter, but that was okay. The charter process, we worked through that and brought it together. So with the purpose of, go one over. So it was a creation of 100%, I say digital first, because we may have storefronts at some point in the future for strategic reasons, but the takeaway is that is a picture of the subscribers, which are the board members now, and Maurice's picture there, second from the right. And the hard work of our volunteers coming in and having hours and hours and hours of meetings and making this critical decisions that was positioning the new credit union in a very different way is inspiring to me. And one of the hugest takeaways that I saw that in a lot of communities we worked in, but like in the Falkland Islands, that the communities, the nonprofit volunteers giving their life to make it a difference made me really appreciate the governance process at such a high level. And we are so proud, make no mistake about it, that group of volunteers built the new credit union and are managing the new credit union. This was not a management initiative. This was their vision. And it really made me appreciate, with all the dialogue of all the governance rooms that I'd sat in around the world, to appreciate our system and its support and its ability to honestly change the communities that we serve. So we built Civic, and we're going to be improving communities. We're addressing poverty in North Carolina, affordable housing and green initiatives. That's a whole other conversation, but I think it's important, and it reflects on the evolution of management and what society expects of organizations. The next slide that you showed a moment ago, it just shows some of the work. And I wanted to reflect to the audience that Falkland Islands study, that was a pretty lengthy study. It was, I don't know, maybe 40 pages or so. The financial forecast was very comprehensive with a bunch of tabs across the bottom. And then it built the very first business plan, which looks different now. But that first business plan was also an application for a charter. And that ended up being over 150 pages, built off the foundations on our financial forecast of everything in Falkland Islands. So we're trying to document this as part of our history, that all the hard work that we did, and no one in this organization ever questions the hard work we did in Falkland Islands, set us on a new course strategically in what we're doing. So working with the international team was a new experience for us. The comprehensive research that was needed to take place in insurance and other things was very much a learning opportunity. The appreciation, again, of the volunteers and the credit union system, I've talked a little bit about. And with all that work, it was just, one of the points I made at the very beginning is you really have to align with your ideal self. Your ideal self is going to inspire you, and that's where I challenge what engagement looks like. So you get what you give. We've all heard that. If you pour yourself into an engagement and it is not a trip, because guess what? I've never worked so hard. You get up at 7 or before for breakfast, you're in a car, you're meeting with people all day long. You can barely stay awake, and next thing you know, you're in a group dinner with leaders discussing very complex issues, and then you are sitting around at night trying to do a lessons learned and prepare for the next day. When you get back, you are exhausted, but you have to open your mind and really say, okay, I don't know, I need to learn, I need to listen. We always are in problem solving mode when we're on our day-to-day jobs. And in this, you really have to create, different solutions to different problems and different cultures, which is the most challenging thing to understand, because you have to let the learning come to you by listening. It's true diversity and inclusion of ideas, that you do not take a position on something early. You just listen for a great deal of time, and you learn from who's teaching you, and then solutions start being reflected. But that engagement, I would challenge, if any of you are thinking about being engaged, this is not a trip. It is not just going somewhere. It is hard work before, during, and after. And if you stay engaged, and you have to invest, like we've invested our own money, but I can tell you without a doubt, this credit union would be different if we didn't have these experiences as a broad team that is working on all these items. So why is it important? Again, since the 1930s, I cannot think of historically a better period of time where people are saying, hey, just capital is not enough. I want to come to work. I want to be engaged. I want to be aligned with what I believe is important. I want to know that I'm making a difference in the communities and members that we're serving. I want to manage in a different way. And if I don't have that meaning of work, then it's not just about money. I'm going to go somewhere else and find someone that is aligned and understands. And I can't imagine any industry being better positioned to be at the forefront of this change, just as we've innovated in all the other environments. Think about the early 80s and the 90s when we were entering new products and mortgages. And so we've been innovative as an industry, real-time transactions. So now's the time to be innovative in spreading cooperative finance around the world as a responsibility, but then bringing those learnings back home and making a difference in our members and how we serve and how our organizations run. Because there's some brilliant people out in all these areas that really understand our purpose. So you gain new perspectives. All that hard work with the group in China, I'm still friends with Bill Cheney. I'm still friends with Sarah Bang. Everyone that was on the trip, you just have a connection that you don't have. And so how does that help me? Well, if I have an issue and I have something that's going on and I know that one of those leaders has expertise in it, I just pick up the phone and I call them, and they help me think of the issue at a different level. So all of those organizations. The other thing is there are some very, very bright people working with World Council, and they're very humble about it. But if you listen to them, the learnings, not only cultural learnings, but the learnings of how this system is really set to make a much bigger difference globally and in the United States is a key takeaway for me. So I could talk, as you know, for a very long time about that, but I may want to open it up to questions, or I can go a little bit longer on some of the initiatives. But I see a real opportunity, and I'm excited that you've taken your time today to be a part of this. But the opportunity is right there. This system of best practices and going around the globe and expanding these systems, like in Afghanistan and Poland, and all the integration. It reminds me, in my research, there was a metaphor that was provided to me that I think lends itself to this conversation. And it was given by one CEO, but there were several that talked about this. They said, if we just focus on our one organization, if we just focus on this one organization and we vertically scale, so I create a couple QSOs and all this other, but I'm not really partnering with the broader community. They said, if you could build the strongest oak tree in the middle of the field, it could be the strongest oak tree that ever existed, and a mild storm could blow it over. But if you create an ecosystem, if you create a forest of people participating in this cooperative finance and building out systems that are not just myopic or just focused on your one organization, no storm can blow that tree down, right? We know that with cooperatives that we're better together, but that is what World Council is about. That's what this engagement is about, is that you're building a broader community and you're changing finance by financing change. And it's important what you decide what you're going to do, but it's also very important what you're not going to do. So the World Council is creating the forest. You know, CUNA is creating the forest. The stronger the forest, the stronger all of us are, and most importantly, the greater impact that we have on the communities in the world. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, Dwayne. We do have some really great questions coming in from our attendees. One of the things I wanted to piggyback on Dwayne's comments about in his global journey is he's exactly right. There are so many opportunities out there globally to engage with your international peers. And it's a two-way street, not just US credit unions engaging international, but international credit union peers engaging amongst one another as well. And the engagement trips that Dwayne has talked about through the webinar really have been put on by World Council and have been almost one-off engagement initiatives. And for those of us here at the Worldwide Foundation, we really looked at that model. We looked at all the other things, all the other engagement touch points that occur, that we offer. Global Women's Leadership Network initiatives, our Y Cup initiatives, our disaster relief initiatives. And we really thought that there was a real opportunity to combine all of these touch points, all of these engagement experiences, and offer them to the market as a more comprehensive and uniform model. And that's how our program Global Bridges was born. Global Bridges is really a brand new initiative that the Worldwide Foundation is offering to credit unions and to individuals and system partners to be able to say to you, we can create a global engagement experience for you. It can be a mixture of similar experiences that Dwayne has talked about, getting on a plane with us and our team and going to an international credit union system and rolling up your sleeves and volunteering, or simply studying best practices, creating a network, expanding your global network. But we recognize that, many, if not all of you, have employee engagement, talent retention, talent acquisition programs. And can the Worldwide Foundation provide kind of that global thread that you could weave into your employee engagement, professional development initiatives for your staff, for your C-suite, for your board, for yourselves, depending on where you're sitting in your organizations. So really echoing a lot of what Dwayne said in terms of, it's engagement with the Worldwide Foundation, World Council is really an opportunity to expand your network, to study your peers, to understand global trends in terms of the challenges that are facing cooperatives worldwide. And so we can really create that customized global experience for you. And we've done that. We're really happy and proud to be able to say that we've got several credit unions in the US that have embarked with us on this Global Bridges model. And we're walking the journey with them and really trying to understand the different trends and themes and engagement touch points that that credit unions and system partners are really interested in being more of a part of. So I just really wanted to kind of piggyback on Dwayne's comments and really share with the audiences in this webinar that Global Bridges is an active thing. We're going to be talking about it next week at our champion celebration for GAC. We put the registration link in the chat box. It's free, complimentary to anybody. We'd love to have you attend. There'll be more storytelling, more detail about the areas of the foundation's work. And we do have a couple of questions, although for Dwayne, so we're not going to let him off the hook here. We have a question from Marquetta White. She really wanted to ask you, Dwayne, do you feel that agriculture can be a leading industry to expand credit unions globally? And are there strategic opportunities in other industries or social movements? And where do you think the best entry points are for this?
Yes, almost every engagement includes ag lending of some sort. And because many of the societies are still agriculturally based. So in terms of an entry point, our credit union is considering that as well, because North Carolina is obviously a huge, agriculture is still a huge part, especially in the rural communities. The entry point for us is working towards expanding our niche to include agricultural lending and having the expertise. We need to hire that to bring it in. In the other communities, for example, in Ukraine, you have all these small farms and all they need is a harvester, right? The harvester would increase their production. If they could buy it together, then they all could share that resource, right? That's cooperative. So if they could finance that, but the regulation will not allow a cooperative to lend over a certain amount, and it's a really small number. I don't want to quote it because I don't want to get it wrong. So the regulation is holding back the ability for the small farmers to thrive because they have to use more outdated systems for harvest. So just in that case, that's one reason the World Council is working with the regulators to try to change a policy and finance to allow them more. I want to be able to answer your question directly. Yes, agricultural finance is critically important to grow, especially the rural communities with all the urbanization that will continue to take place. Entry point for us is we're still in stabilization mode because we've grown quite fast, but is to study first and then bring in expertise rather than trying to learn slowly. And fortunately, we have the resources that we can do that. Is that addressing that question properly or directly?
Yeah, we'll see if Marquetta puts a response in the chat, and so we'll give her a few minutes to respond. We do have another question/point from Ron Newman, who we know well. He's the CEO of Oregon Community Credit Union in Eugene, Oregon. Hello, Ron. I hope you're doing well. He wanted to get your advice, Dwayne, in terms of, what are some of the other, engagement touch points, or what would you recommend in terms of what would you say to your credit union peers in terms of what would be some of the entry points for global engagement with the Worldwide Foundation and the World Council? I can certainly extrapolate on some of what you said, especially with the barriers of COVID-19, not being able to travel in person. Obviously, no one's traveling. None of us are going on field engagement trips into the field right now. But what virtual does offer us is, quite honestly, a lot more versatility to engage a much broader audience across time zones through a virtual lens to continue to respond to peer need or peer challenges that international credit unions movements are facing. I talked a little bit about the Global Bridges program. The credit unions that have engaged with us in that program are currently engaged with an international peer, whether it be a credit union, a national association, or a payments QSO, to help solve a particular challenge. So, and we're conducting that particular engagement touch point 100% virtually right now. We do hope to ultimately go back to an in-person model. We suspect that going forward, there'll be more of a hybrid model where there can be a mixture of virtual learning and in-person learning, because there's obviously a value benefit to both. But one of the greatest touch points that we can provide and help coordinate for credit unions and individuals within the movement are these field engagement models, as Dwayne alluded to, with the Falkland Islands, with the China trip, with the trip to Kurdistan and Iraq. So we can certainly continue to coordinate those, and need does come in, funnels through our CEO's office, Dr. Brian Branch, and he then does a really great job of course, as everyone knows, to kind of match make and really try to seek out the right partners that have to be at the table to solve those specific credit union challenges. So just wanted to extrapolate on Ron's question, Dwayne, a little bit before you had an opportunity to give any additional insight in terms of the value of, say, the Global Women's Leadership Network, or the YCUP program, Disaster Relief Initiative, and any further credit union development work.
Well, I'm going to call Ron out, because Ron was in consulting internationally in cooperative finance. So he has and it's tough not interacting with people in this environment. But I would say that you're participating now. I mean, the fact that you took the time out of your day to listen to some of these stories and conversations, that you're participating now. So yes, on another, I was supposed to be in Bangladesh this week, and so life is kind of being stalled for a while, and that's frustrating. But there's also other things, and this is one thing that Michael's kind of working on, is that we can have leadership programs that connect people from all over the world, that can connect online. So it's not always, being gone a week or 2 weeks and things like that. There's other ways to engage. I would say that if you are, the way I started learning was, if I'm at the GAC, I always go offsite and go to the World Council and whatever embassy that they're having a session in. And I guess, Mike, you're doing it virtually this time. But every time that there was a meeting with the World Council, you get there and you start developing relationships, and relationships lead to other opportunities. But I would just say that if you, and I'm just going to speak as a credit union person, Mike, and because I'm very good about being direct, but here's the deal. How many people do you think approach World Council and they say, I'm all in, I'm all in, I'm all in, and then they just kind of aren't? There's only a few. I guess it's almost like the bell curve. There's only a few that say, yes, I see my contribution. I see how I can really have an impact, but you have to engage. You have to go all in, knowing that there's no perfect system, but there's something that's drawing you in your heart to have a larger impact and to learn at a higher level. And then if you give your whole self, I promise you, I know this for a fact, that you will get much more learning. So in an environment like this, where we're all challenged, we can still connect like this. You still connect to all the virtual environments. You still can connect. And if this goes another year or so, I don't know, maybe we have to innovate and be able to bring groups together. But I wouldn't wait till after this is over. I would engage fully now, and because that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing now. And I'm having conversations with many people about the work that's being done here.
Now you bring up a great point, Dwayne. One of the other chats, or one of the other comments in the Q&A box, really is from our friend Mark Voles, who's a YP within the movement, who has been connected with the DE program and I3 with Filene. And he's curious, if for those credit union professionals who aren't in the C-suite, who aren't at the board level, are there recommendations on how to get started on an international journey? And I can give one example to kind of kick off the response. One is our YCUP program and our GWN, our Global Women's Leadership Network. I mean, both of those initiatives, which now are under the Worldwide Foundation as areas of work, they're both currently offering complimentary virtual engagement opportunities. Next week, we have the GWN Virtual Breakfast, where there'll be a deep dive discussion about global credit union women's issues and challenges and inequality gaps that they're facing. And the YCUP program is hosting a series of quarterly virtual summits that are bringing YP leaders from all different walks of life across time zones that are YP leaders, in their own right within their respective credit unions or leagues or national associations. So to your point, Dwayne, we're just a click away now, whether it's through a Zoom call or registering for a virtual event. The global movement has never been more accessible as it is right now within the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, like I said, I think, if I had a crystal ball, we're going to continue to offer engagement opportunities kind of within a hybrid model, because there's really nothing that can take away you being there on the ground, in the field, connecting with your peers internationally. So I just wanted to kind of caveat that, and give you an opportunity to respond.
I appreciate that question, because not only do I have the support of this activity, the board members get it and they're highly involved, but that was not always the case. I mean, Maurice is working on a million initiatives. I don't know how he gets it all done, but when he engaged and went, I believe, to Thailand, and he went in and saw the work that was being done, he understood. So there is a way, there's a saying, if you want to lead, show up. So if you continue to show up, the YCUP and Global Alliance Women Network, they have those sponsorships that you compete for, I believe. Mike, don't let me.
Scholarships, yeah. Scholarship program,
you compete for, that helps you get over those internal constraints. If you've won something and you're bringing recognition to your credit union, but I can tell you the Global Women's Leadership Network, that's a whole nother thing. Every time I go, I'm a member, and every time I go to their sessions, they are some of the best sessions of any conference. But you can, right now, you can engage now that the cost is reasonable. And if you show up, you'll see where your contribution could be. And I never know when I enter anything where I can contribute, but if you're just showing up and you're on these calls and you're in the membership and you're getting the information, that if your heart is leading you that path, then perhaps you have conversations with the C-suite and you have Mike or Brian Branch or whoever to come in to speak to your full executive team or your board. But it is not something that if I submitted it and said, I want to do this, and somebody goes, no, then I take that as, okay, then I try something else, then I try something else. But if you're just solely committed to the engagement and you're passionate about it, you will get into leadership positions that create greater influence, but you've got to give the organization time to catch up. It's not a presentation. It's not 5 presentations. It may be 5 years. But it took us 5-6 years to really have the board and everybody else embrace it. And you can't get frustrated. You just have to continue to inspire and lead with passion and show, don't give them a spreadsheet, but just show the value of those contributions. So all the work that Michael's getting ready to do in building this bridging program and all that other stuff creates opportunity. So I think my contact information is here. I will talk with anyone in terms of how that might be able to be done. I don't have all the answers, but I can help you think it through.
Well, Dwayne, I think I can speak for our attendees on the webinar today, our foundation board and all of our donors out there, how grateful we are for you to take the time to walk us through your global journey. And I would just reiterate again, Dwayne is available to answer any specific questions you have for him and his experiences. And the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions it has positioned itself and will continue to position itself as the engagement and fundraising arm of the World Council, and the Global Bridges program that I talked a little bit about is the next iteration of offering really a uniform and comprehensive global journey for institutions, for individuals, for system partners, credit unions of all varying shapes and sizes. There's a plethora of global opportunities out there, and international peers and our movement globally needs all the time, talent, and treasure that we can muster to continue to move the needle and grow credit unions worldwide to ultimately transform lives worldwide. So We have a virtual marketplace booth at the GAC for those of you that are attending and registered for the virtual GAC this year. We do have a virtual booth. We're going to be hosting a series of roundtables all next Tuesday and Wednesday. So please feel free to stop by. And of course, if you want to attend our virtual champion celebration this year, it's this coming Monday from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. And our GWN virtual breakfast is occurring in the morning on Wednesday, March 3rd as well. So again, thank you so much to you, Dwayne. Thank you for all your service. We're grateful.
I will say, you just answered that last question. There's 4 or 5 virtual connections already. One day life will become a little bit normal and we'll be able to get on the road again, but it starts today. And I can share a whole bunch of different stories, but I put my cell phone in the chat. So if you need me, you know where to get me.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
And again, as a reminder, the webinar is recorded today, so it will be available within the next few hours on the World Council's YouTube channel, youtube.com/WOCU. Thank you again to Dwayne, and safe blessings to each of you. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks again for doing global good.
Thank you.